Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
And welcome to Chapter 5, Part 2. And we are following on from last week's episode. We've got the fabulous trio here with us too. Priyank, Mike, and Chris. Priyank is enjoying some time in his garden for this week's episode. So
No, someone's occupying my room, and otherwise I don't like change.
Change is the inevitable nature of life.
I mean, there's an ant on my keyboard right now. I don't like these kind of things because I don't want to kill the ant while typing away.
Ahimsa, Priyank.
Exactly.
Ahimsa.
Podcast's gonna suffer.
Very important. Very important. And well, the saints spoke about that, didn't they? The importance of ahimsa. And speaking of saints, that's a nice little segue. We are now going on to the point in the chapter where Mukunda is about to meet the saint. But before he does, we had a little notice of the chapter title of A Perfume Saint Displays His Wonders, and realized that a perfume saint had been put in quotation marks. And I was thinking about this, and I did a little definition search, as I do, and usually one puts those quotation marks in either to, denote that that's been said, or to question or doubt the validity, which I thought was interesting. And I wondered if anyone else had any thoughts on this as to why he may have put it.
Do you think it's like a bit of banter that Guruji did, like Perfume Saint quotes, because he wasn't really, in his opinion, wasn't really a saint, but just a mere wonder worker?
Yeah, it could have been something like that. I suppose he was known as the Perfume Saint, so maybe he's simply referencing, this is we were talking about the Perfume Saint. So it's more of a reference as opposed to trying to knock the power that this individual does have off, knock him off his perch. And somehow the word perfume reduces the word saint a little bit, doesn't it? So he's a saint when it comes to producing perfumes, but don't really hear much about the rest of his like complete perfection, right? So maybe that's also why he puts it there. I mean, we'll see in the chapter why, like Guruji discusses a little bit, he kind of puts it in, he asks a question, if you are a saint, why do you have to create wonders, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And we're going to get to that point in this podcast. So, speaking of, last week we were having quite an in-depth discussion about, compassion. That was where we left off, and we are going to follow on. So, at the moment, Mukunda and the sage are at the Calcutta Kalighat Temple. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Please say if I haven't. And there, the saint, they're looking at this magnificent building, and the saint just dismisses it. And he says that bricks and mortar sing us no audible tune. The heart opens only to the human chant of being, which is scripture in itself. And for me, it was just it was really an acknowledgement of eternal truth. It feels so true. What do you think, Chris?
I wonder if you could just take that sentence and meditate on it. Would you be able to reveal, the path to God in and of itself? Because it's such a profound statement, isn't it? And it's actually so easy just to say, oh yeah, we know what that means. The chakra, the heart chakra, it opens up, and that you need that for spiritual development and everything. But there's quite a lot to it, isn't there? And when I was looking at that, I did what I'd normally do, which is Google content of Yogananda online, referencing to the heart,
I came across a really nice bit that Brother Satyananda provided for us to maybe read and talk about a little bit more. And it's from a speech that he gave, and he said that Swami Sri Yukteswarji in the Holy Science book outlined the 5 states of the human heart. And we can read maybe some of a summary, a very short summary, but to anybody who actually does, from based on what we'll say today, wants to go in and read more and read what Brother Satyananda actually went into, we'll include the link to where you can go and do that. So you can kind of go and delve into it as much as your heart desires. But really, the 5 states of the heart goes from dark to propelled to steady to devoted to clean. And Sri Yukteswarji said that really, if you can understand these stages, you can understand yourself and where you are in your own development, and that should bolster your own development spiritually, but also for your friends and family. So where they are, it can really help. That knowledge can help you help others. So maybe I'll kick us off with the dark heart. And so really here we have the unawareness that dominates the lives of those with dark hearts, and that the lack of understanding of life's purpose is there, and you remain ignorant in cosmic law. So some may even succumb to evil. However, profound suffering emerges, pushing us towards self-realization and self-reflection, and prompting the existential questions to come about, which then propels us into the propelled heart.
Yes, the propelled heart. We embark on a quest for truth, seeking the nature of the universe. Desperately searching, we read, attend lectures, and engage in discussions. Through intense yearning and heartfelt pleas, we petition a higher power for help. The Guru arrives, chosen by divine intervention in response to our sincere soul call.
The steady heart. Many falter here due to strong karmic obstacles. When loyalty to the Guru and the practice of Kriya Yoga become essential. Although some relationships may strain, staying kind and patient allows for important lessons. Service to others awakens as motivation, drawing people toward our compassionate presence.
There we go to the devoted heart. It says, in this phase, we transcend external dependencies, finding fulfillment in the guru-disciple relationship. Through meditation and Kriya Yoga, we attune to the Guru's vibrations, experiencing their presence and guidance, both in and outside of meditation.
And then finally, we come to the goal. It'll be written on my wall somewhere to remind me. The clean heart, the purified and fearless heart becomes a source of light. A deep love for the divine prevails, and we become faithful and loyal servants. Eventually, we reach a state of equality with the Guru, a promise that surpasses our imagination. Then there was a lovely quote in there that Brother Satyananda included. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. It's a quote from Jesus, from the Bible, of Jesus Christ. Now, I'll not say where I think I am on that stage, but I'm not asking of you. But it's definitely worth reflecting on, isn't it? And you can unpack so much there.
So we not oscillate between those various phases of our life, or even day, or even meditation. But I really like this stages of the heart. I remember brother Nikhilananda recently. He was talking about door of my heart, and he was saying like the heart remembers that. You may like forget that the chant, but if someone plays it like 10, 20, 30 years down the line, if you had that strong feeling or devotion that came out of singing that, then you'll come back to that space. So the heart remembers. The heart has this memory, which is quite a lovely thought.
if the nose has memory or the ear has memory, the heart definitely has memory. Very powerful. Sensory organ as well.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for bringing that here, because I feel like that's really going to help a lot of us distinguish where we're coming from in our hearts, in our day to day.
Yeah, just going back to the line where he was essentially saying they were at the temple, the Kalighat Temple, and they obviously dismissed it. He said, with a sweeping gesture, my chance companion dismissed the ornate dignitary, which was the line that came before this heart line, and it, then the crux of it was the heart opens only to the human chant of being. So there's two elements of that. The element we just discussed that Chris found lovely was about the different what do you call it, Chris? The stages of the heart, different types, stages of the heart. But here he's basically dismissing the temple. So the Kalighat Temple was built in 1800 and something. It's a stunning temple, and it hasn't really changed much even to this day. I mean, I found a really good picture of it. We'll put it on the link, or maybe even the picture for the thumbnail for this episode part. So it's like this really ornate, beautiful temple. It's got a bit of a feeling of Islamic art in there as well. Hopefully, I intend to go there later this year. But it hasn't changed much since then. And so what he's kind of saying in this line was he's dismissing this beautiful, called it ornate dignity, and then saying that the heart's only heart opens only to the human chant of being. And I wanted to ask you about that. So people are very attracted to temples and physical forms, like I don't know, the statues of Christ, statues of Mary, or in Krishna, statues of Krishna, etc. So here he's kind of dismissing the temple, but also you could say he's dismissing the idol worship as well, because he's saying the heart is, the heart doesn't need an idol. It's essentially, it can go beyond physical form to this 5 stages, and the ultimate stage is obviously God realization, which requires or needs no temple in front of you to attain. Personally, I not a big fan of idols or externals, and in terms of needing a beautiful temple to get in a devotional state, as some people obviously do. I mean, each to their own. But I was wondering, what do you guys think of that?
Yeah, it's a good observation, really. I think from the previous episode that we covered, what this sadhu had been saying, he was very, very introspective, right? He was saying, you have to go inward in order to find, the truths in life. And so it's a continuation of that, really, in some sense, isn't it? To say, hey, the chant of the human chant of being really happens within you. So that's, your universe happening within you, and everything else is outward expression. So, it's more wise simply to go to the source, which is within. So it seems to be a continuation from what he said previously, and what he probably will say here, which is an observation on Yogananda and his youth, and he's sort of trying to teach, isn't he?
It's really hard to know, but I wouldn't take this as an absolute verdict on all temples, right? I think what the saint here says is that the power that you feel is coming from your own heart's worship, right? And it doesn't come from the building, and that's true, definitely, right? And also, you don't, like Priyank said the word need earlier, I don't think you need any building to worship God or to love God, right? But I think Guruji says that in different speeches. He kind of mentions that wherever saints have dwelled or where people worship, there is like a special kind of energy that can sometimes uplift you. And I guess that's why Mukunda went in the first place. But of course, yeah, like this sadhu has been dropping truth bombs left and right in the last chapter, and he keeps on doing that. So, I mean, of course, you don't need the building to worship God.
You know, you walk around London, for example, and there's some buildings that just cause you anxiety walking near. Like there's sort of these huge overarching structures, with metal and concrete, and sort of defies nature. But there are some buildings out there that actually maybe even induce a more meditative state themselves. So it isn't one size fits all and a clear dismissal. I don't think Priyank, but yeah, I think for sure he's enjoying his time anyway. The way he's sort of theatrically talking, isn't he? Sort of being very, very theatrical, and making a point to Yogananda.
You say you don't need it, obviously, Mike. We don't need these things, but there's a lot of people in the state that they've got themselves into the psychological need to go to these places to pray, and rather than being able to pray wherever they are. And also darshan is this big thing in India where if, you have to go take darshan. Darshan means to stand in the physical presence of a place, or in front of your guru, or in front of a holy person. And there's this big driver, and people would sometimes neglect their practices and go to these. And I always wonder about that. And I always quote Sri Yukteswar, from the autobiography, when he says, "Why come and see my flesh and form when I'm ever within range of your kutastha?" And that's one of my favorite quotes in the autobiography. And this kind of this saint who's saying bricks and mortar, he's dismissing it. He's kind of in a different way reaffirming that in a bit more harsh way, I suppose, because he's standing in front of one of the most beautiful and important temples in India, actually, this Kalighat Temple, and he's kind of dismissing it.
I also feel like it goes deeper still than that. He's not, to me, I feel that what he's really saying is the material plane of creation doesn't really sing an audible tune. But when we be in our true being, that's when the heart opens, and there's so much to delve into there. But I feel like we've, even in our state of being in this world up to this point, each one of us has probably had a moment, or continued moments, or however that may be for you, where everything falls away and you are being, and you feel that opening, you feel life itself. And that to me is the human chant of being. That's when the soul is chanting, that's when we are truly being as intended. And yeah, it's such a poignant line, and he says so much with so little words, as often do the saints. So yes. So after he's dropped this absolute truth bomb and one for us all to ponder on, they then wander off into the sunshine, and he surveys Mukunda thoughtfully, and then again he speaks this truth again, as often he does. And Priyank, what does he say?
He says the ancient rishis laid down iridacable patterns of spiritual living. So another nod to the ancient rishis. And some of the ancient rishis that I can think of that he could possibly have been referring to are, say, the Sapta rishis. Chris gave you a book about that recently, the 7 original rishis, of one of the most important of which was probably Agastya, Saint Agastya Muni, who was, and apparently they went all across the globe actually, and wherever the spirituality is like flowered, even like in South America and the Middle East, one of these rishis was responsible for that in some way. Anyway, so Agastya Muni is the one of the most important ones, and then there's Shankaracharya, who's the reorder of, he kind of reorganized the Hinduism really. And then obviously there's Mahavatar Babaji as well, which is a modern day one, shall we say. Shankaracharya was 1,000 years ago. Agastya is 5,000, 10,000. You can't even put age on that, but there's temples and places all around of India which have got his mark as legends. And in Lauren, have you got your hand up, or is that? Yeah, please.
So I was just quickly going to ask, for those who may not know, Priyank, what is a rishi? If someone hasn't come across this term before, what does it mean?
So we've got the footnote, which is described as rishi literally means seers, and they were the authors of the Vedas, and are, as I said, indeterminate antiquity. So we don't know how old. But Chris found something quite cool on Wikipedia somewhere about rishis, and it says there they see all as energy, and with their panoramic X-ray view, they translate this larger vista and understanding for the world. The revelations that come to them takes the form of a mantra at times, or even a yantra, which is the form as well. So mantras and yantras. Yantra is a form. So like most temples have a deity, an idol, and you could call that a yantra because a lot of energy work happens to make it a really magnetic space or place that people can easily be devotional. So yeah, that's that. But you know, in terms of the iridacable, how do you even say that? Iridacable patterns. Is that right, Lauren?
I think it may be Oh, I'm just going to say exactly how you said it in mind. In my head, it sounded different. Sorry.
I mean, I'm the non-English speaker here, but I kind of see the word eradicate in there, right?
It is, yeah.
So
ineradicable,
and then there's ineradicable, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
I've just Googled and confirmed. Yes, correct.
So yeah, these patterns of spiritual living, I thought we'd just briefly touch on them. And we've talked about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So Patanjali is another of these very important rishis. But who remembers the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras? And Chris, I'm hoping you do. What are the eight Yoga Sutras of Patanjali?
You want me to say all 8?
No, just the name.
I can say it's non-violence, truthfulness.
No.
Patanjali.
Yes, Patanjali's 8 Yoga Sutras are Yama, Niyama, Asana. So you know what yamas and niyamas are. Do's and do nots is niyama, do's are niyam. Asana, which is the correct posture and having your body nice. And then there's pranayama, yeah, which is something that we do as part of our practice. Then there's pratyahara, then there is dharana, then there's dhyana, then the last one is Mike?
Samadhi.
Yeah. Nice one. Right, we get 10 points, Mike, and unfortunately, Chris, you're not going to quite meet that. Come on, guys, we've talked about Patanjali a few times, and I've put this hospital path question before. You can't.
Yeah, I'm sure our listeners, they were listening to this and were like, they knew all of them. They were naming them.
Yeah, so there's that. And then there's as Chris said, the ahimsa, he obviously said satya. Then there's brahmacharya, which is like conserving your energy. Then there's others. Then there's also
satya.
Oh, nice. Then there's also right eating as well. So we've the different types of food, you know, plentiful supply of raw fruits and vegetables Guruji advises us on, which is basically highly positive pranic, or you might call it sattvic foods. And then there's rajasic foods, which are kind of, they give you a bit of inertia. And then there's tamasic food. Tamas means like darkness or withdrawing energy. So those are the foods that are like red meats and onions and garlics. There's various things that do that fall in that category, which you should avoid. But you can research all of them up in your leisure.
Very good. Thank you for that, Priyank.
One thing that I found very comforting in there is that coffee, my beloved coffee, is not a tamasic food.
It is, Mike. Caffeine.
No.
Caffeine is
at least
caffeine and alcohol. Caffeine and alcohol is tamasic.
I have many sources that tell me it's not.
Mike needs to revisit the
ignorance. Ignorance is bliss, eh, Mike? Hear no evil.
No, I just come up with my own studies. Yes.
So he's he's just said about this inner radical pattern of spiritual living, which Priyank has very kindly told us about. And then he goes on to say and kind of explain a little bit more and give us another instruction. So Priyank, what does he say next?
He talks about the fact that this learning, or what the rishis have said, he said is not outmoded, not unsophisticated against the guiles of materialism. The disciplinary precepts mold India still by millenniums, more than embarrassed scholars care to compute. The skeptic time has validated Vedic worth. Take it for your heritage. So much patriotism in there, isn't there? But also so much just truth. And I dare say it's this is kind of India centric. He's kind of making this, but the wisdom of the East is penetrating most parts of the West these days. So it's really cool. And Yogananda, I think this is the first time that he really being patriotic about India and the autobiography, for the first of many times. Don't know. But I really like the skeptic time, which is quite cool. And it's a nice word, but in Hindi, or they probably would have been speaking Hindi, or no, actually it would have been Bengali. It would have been something different. But one of the deity is Kali Ma, which is the Kala, one of the words, it means time. So there's probably that subtle reference in there if they use the Hindi, or if they related it to the deity, because they are kind of talking about the temple, it's elucidating from the temple all these beautiful points.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth, isn't there, in everything that he says. And I particularly love this last line. It went straight to the heart for me when he said, take it for your heritage. And it really made me reflect, how much do we take these radical patterns of spiritual living as our heritage each day? Are we really trying to live them in each moment? And how far and how deeply and how steadfastly are we doing so? So maybe that's a little point of reflection for us all this week. Just going to throw in a bunch of homework this episode, but maybe that's something to reflect on daily. So yes, we've had this, and then they bid farewell, and he then reveals this clairvoyant perception where he says, after you leave here today, an unusual experience will come your way. And the two depart. So we're left on a bit of a point of intrigue. And lo and behold, a very humorous encounter ensues. And I love this part of this chapter. It's hilarious to me. I find it so funny. Guruji is just a comical genius at the way he expresses himself through language and conveys these events, and I just think it's so funny, and but also so much learning in there as well. And they do say you learn when you're having fun, and you are laughing. So we're about to learn something through this. So Guruji, or Mukunda at the time, he leaves the temple. He's aimlessly wandering about. Yes, Mike, I feel like you have something to say.
No, you go. I'll
before we
come
go.
in.
Okay, so he leaves the temple. He's wandering around aimlessly, and then he bumps into an old acquaintance, and he describes this old acquaintance as one of those fellows whose conversational powers ignore time and embrace eternity. And I feel like this is so relatable, and in different levels as well. You know, we've all been there where, you know, we are in that situation where someone will not stop talking and we really want to leave. There's that point which is this for Mukunda at the time. But then there's also the other side where we are in conversation and time leaves and eternity begins, and it's a beautiful exchange, and it's very deep and very meaningful. But in this case, unfortunately for Mukunda, it's not one of joy. Mike?
And the atmosphere in the chapter changes radically from one moment to the next. And Guruji, he really, he does this nicely by just starting off with a joke, right? And I feel like that's how the reader knows, okay, now the kind of the period of this very dense, very ancient truth is like over, and now we're telling a light-hearted story.
It's a good way of doing it, isn't it? And I'm wondering what, you know, he said before he met this chap, he said he was wandering around aimlessly. I often wander around aimlessly, but you wouldn't necessarily write it in your autobiography. I'm wondering why he wrote he was wandering around aimlessly, especially seeing as he was this is, you know, he's reminiscing some events that are 30, 40 years old. Chris, do you know before
I did think about this. It struck me as humorous, and I wonder why I kind of put it in. You know, I thought to myself, what would you do? You have this conversation, you strike up a conversation with somebody at a temple. They're, you know, fascinating. He doesn't say really, you know, how that conversation necessarily ends. Today you'd be like, oh, you know, let's keep in touch, get on the, you know, phone, swap details, do something that way. But I think there's just something to the transition and how he includes that in to say, to me, how life can, when you live it, you know, in that moment, as he seems to be, he's aimless. He doesn't necessarily have that purpose in that moment. He's enjoying the moment so much. Life is kind of happening to him and happening for him. It struck me as just sort of being in the moment. I don't know if that's me reading into it too much or not, but that's what popped into my mind when I thought.
Laura?
I had a similar thing, Chris, you know, and I think here he's not going to search for this unusual experience that's going to come his way. He's aimlessly wandering, and he's letting the divine in to guide and to, you know, make him wander in the direction that's meant for him, not the one that he's seeking, which I find quite interesting.
Thank you for that. So yeah, Lauren's absolutely right. This is such a funny line, isn't it? One whose conversational powers ignore time and embrace eternity. And I'm sure many of us have met these souls that really implement this quality, which is Guruji describes it in a funny way, but I don't think it's a beneficial quality to have, Chris.
You know, Guruji don't describe it in a funny way, and you know, we are talking about it like, you know, it's maybe not the best quality to have, and you know, that these comments inevitably will come about because that's the direction of the joke. But actually, I don't blame him. You know, if I was
able to, talk to Guruji, I would be trying to get every single minute that I probably could in a very greedy way. So I thought, if I can't blame the guy. If I was there, I'd be probably doing the same thing and guilty of the same thing as he.
Yes. Well, yeah. If it was to the guru, I dare say you might wish to be a bit silent, but and let him talk, because and say what he wants to say, rather than leading him into what you want him, what you're getting out of him, rather. Because I was more thinking about, everyday conversations when you meet these souls that can just speak forever, and usually it's about themselves. It's about their children or whatever's going on in their work, or all these mundane conversational things. And I'm sure Guruji mentions this, that speak less, spend more time inward, and it's so obvious, but so few people implement that. There's so much so that it's a stigma, isn't it? If there's silence between a group of people, then it's like seen as this, these guys that don't really get along, they've got nothing to say to each other, when that's not necessarily the case. And for a few spiritual people, it should be the inverse. Actually, less is certainly more. So something that I think we probably all need to work on. But I've experienced it, and I've even experienced the three of you going through it, and rudely interrupted the conversation to get you out of that pickle that you could not get yourselves out of because you're too kind and polite. Chris.
Well, it's a good point, well raised. All I would add to this is when you're in silence, and you're not only are you not bothered by it, but you're blissful and joyful by being in the silence with other people, you're in good company. And it's a good metric.
But this is the problem, though. So if you're in silence, that is a good metric. You're right. Especially if you're around people from the center and stuff. But when you're in, at the bus stop, or speaking to a colleague or an acquaintance or a friend or a family member, and they go on and on and on and on and on, it's difficult, isn't it? What do you do? Because it's actually, it takes a lot of energy, if you know what I mean. It takes not just energy because you have to be there in that moment, but energy because attention, all that kind of stuff, and you don't want to waste it, really. Concentration and things like that. Chris, what do you think?
Does the paradox of life apply here, where you have to break the silence just to be able to stop the continuation of the breaking of the silence? You can't just silently walk away, right? And Yogananda doesn't do that himself. He talks his way out of it, right? So yeah, the more that you are silent, sometimes, yeah, like you said, Greg, the more some people can find the invitation to talk.
Guruji put a whole chapter about this in Man's Eternal Quest. He had a talk about how, I don't remember the title of it, but basically how when you talk to other people, you should try to learn more about them and talk about things that at least they would find interesting. And it's funny that he has to put this in there, because I think that's what a lot of people's natural instinct is anyways, but it is, it was, for him, it was worth putting a whole chapter about it in the book.
I'm a recruiter for a living. I speak to people, interview people all the time. And in sales roles, not that my role is a sales role, but in sales roles, but also I use this in my role, silence is a real power to have in an interview setting, for example. The less you say, sometimes the more the other person wants to talk and needs to talk. So, the more you kind of want to get out of the person, actually silence is a tool for that. as well, which, just on an anecdotal side point, silence is a very powerful thing.
And also
But
going off of
what if, sorry, you go,
no,
Lauren.
go on, Mike. No, go on.
What if you have two people doing this technique at each other?
Then the first one who breaks loses.
Yeah.
Doesn't that's a dream scenario?
Yeah.
You can both be quiet.
But you know, we say all of this, but this acquaintance isn't talking about himself. He's
Yeah, he's
asking
pulling it out. Yeah.
Mukunda.
Yeah,
for all-
this
he wants to know all that's happened, which is, you know, astronomical in its sheer size, isn't it? And I love what Mukunda says next. He says, "What a paradox! I must leave you now. I need to use this more in my life." It's hilarious. It's it's so funny. It's so polite, but it's so direct and straightforward. And there's no beating around the bush. But unfortunately, it didn't quite work in this instance. And you know, this friend is holding him by the hand, and he's trying to force out all these little tidbits of information. And Mukunda describes him as a ravenous wolf, and which he's thinking an amusement. So even Mukunda's finding this really strange situation quite inwardly funny. Yes, Priyank.
ravenous wolf in this context is absolutely hilarious, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love this paradox thing. This is similar to this what was that sleuth hound, porn sleuth hound. he's bringing in these literary magic. But yeah, you're absolutely right, because people that speak when people are speaking, they rarely want to know more about you and bombard you with questions about your life. I usually incur that it's the opposite anyway. So this person's pretty unique in that respect, actually. Mike.
Yeah, and I wonder how this came to be. I mean, maybe this person is quite lonely and he has nobody to talk to, and then he knew, oh, Mukunda is a nice guy. I can now talk to him for hours, and maybe that's why he went for that. Or maybe he does that to everybody, and it's just a habit of his. And what Chris said earlier is so true, though, right? Like, even in his youth, Mukunda was already such a magnetic personality, and he already had disciples, right? So I'm guessing being in his presence was quite the thing. And you then, when you had a chance to talk to Mukunda, you tried to make it a long conversation, I guess. So I don't really blame the guy. Maybe if I would have stood in front of young Mukunda, I would have done the same. It's like, tell me everything.
Yeah, pulling on his coattails, like, don't leave.
Yeah, holding him. No, don't go away.
Yeah, he held his hand, isn't it? He held his hand to stop him from leaving.
He would have been very interesting as well, just to add on that. You know, he traveled around. His dad was, you know, a senior member, you know, in the railways. So there was a life that he lived that probably many people didn't live. And in general, you know, Priyank, you've said it before about the tendency in India is to stay rooted to, you know, where you're from in your village and things like that. It's not atypical sort of travel, and young Mukunda certainly did that quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I've forgotten what I was going to say. You carry on.
It'll come back to you. It'll come back to you, Priyank.
Oh yeah, no, I know, and it's an
you
important
go.
one. Thanks, Lauren. You have faith. It's good.
I do.
What Mike said about, yeah, if he's a cool guy and you'd want to spend time with him, but I'm sure if you knew Mukunda a little bit, you know, he's into his meditation and God, you know, the zeal for God consciousness, or then perhaps you might, rather than just speaking to him, say, shall we have a meditation together? Will we please, you know, let's just have 3 hours meditation. Then you can secure 3 hours, because then he's not going to say no to meditating. I feel like that would be
Sneaky, Priyank.
that would be the best way to track, to pin him down.
Maybe you could say that tonight in your meditation.
Exactly, yeah, you should do that. Well, I do actually. It's a part of pretty much part of your prayer, isn't it? A little bit.
Yes. Yeah. So he's in this situation where his friend is ravenously trying to force him information, and what does he do? he inwardly petitions the goddess Kali to devise a graceful means of escape. And I absolutely love this line because this chapter is so full of ebbs and flows, and it's wonderful storytelling, but also wonderful instruction at the same time. So we've got this hilarity of, Mukunda and this person, and then he gives this instruction without instructing us. And it shows us that we can always ask for divine intervention inwardly. It doesn't have to be this outward display. We don't have to close our eyes and put our hands together. We can speak to God, or the divine, whichever you'd like to call it, in our hearts, and it's listened to always, especially if you are in tune, which we know Mukunda was so in tune. But I also find it interesting how he has visited the temple and then decided and feels that Kali is the one to petition to. He doesn't choose Divine Mother, he chooses Kali. And that too I find interesting. But what I love most is he wants a graceful means of escape. He doesn't just want to leave abruptly. He doesn't want to hurt this person's feelings. He actually wants to do it with respect and dignity. And I think this is really telling of his nature and of who he was even before he met his master and received all of this training. He still cared deeply for others and their feelings and wished to live in the world with as much grace as possible.
Divine, so Mother Goddess Kali is one of the personifications of the form of Divine Mother. So, and
apologies.
No, it's fine. And this form was one that he actually quite liked. Durga was one that he quite liked, and he used to him and his mother, when he was a mere boy, used to make little clay statues of the Divine Mother in that form. And I believe they used to go and submerge. There's a ceremony, there's a religious ceremony in India where you make this idol form of Divine Mother and you go submerge it in the Ganges after a specific time of worship and a specific day. So they used to do that, which was quite nice. So he was always very good little sculptor, shall we say. And Sananda says even like to his later years, he was actually very skilled in sculpting because of that skill that he picked up from his mum. But yeah, you're absolutely right about this this graceful means of escape, because I remember when I pulled all three of you recently out of the conversations that you couldn't get out of. I certainly didn't do it with grace, I don't think. I said, guys, we need to leave. Can you? I'm really sorry, but we've got something that we need to do. And I remember like whenever I don't think to be that polite in various things. I just say it abruptly and all as it is. And Guruji's really, Lauren's absolutely right. He's even, giving us quite a big lesson about retaining your graceful nature, because he obviously had to certainly do that as a guru, because he would have probably had this scenario many times in his life, even later on when he's got 100 lectures to do in a month and someone's talking to him and not ending the conversation as quickly as he would like. Mike.
I think it also goes to show that his relationship with Mother Kali is so strong, and I would say it's always there, that he would ask her for benign things like this, right? So it's not really, that's not a life-changing moment or anything, but he goes like, he just shows that even if we have a situation in life, it's always worth to pray to God, because it's not about if God then comes to us and does it. It's more about that we strengthen our relationship with the divine. And I think Guruji shows how continuous his communication with Divine Mother is at all times.
Mike, wow, thank you for that. That was really, really something. Thank you. Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Often well, I find myself thinking, oh, well, this isn't worthy enough to ask the divine for. It's got to be something. But actually, you're right. It's building the bond, and our divine mother or heavenly father, whichever appeals to you most, is always listening and always there. So thank you, Mike. That was so affirming. So yes, he makes this petition, and then instantaneously he says, my companion left me abruptly. Just imagine that all of this time this person has been clawing at you for information, and then he just leaves. Which again is another time where Mukunda has prayed and it's been answered instantly. And I feel like this is happening throughout the book. It's happened quite a lot so far. And if any of our lovely listeners have any idea of how many times this has happened and wish to discuss it amongst themselves, please feel free to do so, because I'm going to be also going through and seeing, just for my own curiosity. But then, interestingly, so this person leaves, and he's relieved, and he carries on walking. But then he hears, before that, there's another hilarious line where he said he dreading any relapse into the garrulous fever of this person's conversation.
What does garrulous fever mean?
Garrulous, I did look it up. It means excessively talkative, especially on trivial
Right.
matters, which is definitely, obviously Mukunda feels that, speaking of his life in great detail is trivial.
It's pretty cool because he's had this prayer to Divine Mother, and she's as if like instantly given it to him, the blessing. But he doesn't rely on that, because he may not have said I want a permanent escape from this person. He just said I want an escape. That escape could be 10 seconds or 10 hours. He probably didn't specify. So to avoid it being the 10-second category, he's literally running, doubling his pace.
It's great, isn't it? And he
Yeah.
starts hearing these rapid footsteps, and then he starts quickening his speed, and he doesn't dare to look back, and it's just hilarious imagining all of this taking place. And I love that we get the joy of reliving this moment that he had through this book. Yeah, Mike.
I love the dramatic writing here, where it's like really he's just trying to escape, and the worst thing that could ever happen is if he has to talk more to this person. So, but it's to no use. He's like, this guy starts running after him.
And he wins, doesn't he? He claps him on the shoulder and he says, oh, hang on. And he says, I forgot to tell you of Ganda Baba, which means Perfume Saint. And he points to a house, over there, and says, do meet him. He is interesting, and that he may have an unusual experience. And then before we go on, yes, Priyank.
Yeah, and he puts in a word here that describes perhaps this relationship. He said, the youth rejoined me. If someone says youth, if you say this youth has joined me, he's usually younger than you, right? So this is probably one of these childhood, someone that considers Mukunda like a mentor, and this kind of probably answers the question as to why he's asking him so many questions, because he's trying to like pick his brain for various things and updates about his life and all his projects. Like Mukunda was like, opening libraries, doing gyms, and all these kind of things. If you read Mejde, he was doing such cool things that you'd want to extract as much information from him as you can, especially if you're looking up to him.
I had to laugh when you just said, you should see Ganda Baba, he's interesting. And in my head, the sentence changed to, unlike me, he's interesting.
Self-deprecating. No, Mike.
No, stop.
No,
So he says, you may have an unusual experience. Goodbye. And I love this last line. He says, and he actually left me. And I don't know about you, but it feels such a modern way to express that, then he actually left, I can't believe it. How great. It's very amusing. I love this whole section of the chapter. So he's then quite curious. and he recalls the prediction at the temple that he's had with the sadhu, and he's very intrigued because of that conversation. And so he goes to the house, and he's ushered into what he describes as a commodious parlor, so a very large, spacious parlor where loads of people are sitting, you know, on the floor, and it's a very thick orange carpet, he says. And then this bit also I find amusing. I'm not quite sure why, but you know, he says an awed whisper reached my ear, and I can just imagine this, you know, and this person says, "Behold Ganda Baba on the leopard skin," and to me, it might not have been like that, but to me, it was very humorous, but in a very sweet way. You know, this person's obviously so in awe. So yes, there is Ganda Baba on the leopard skin. And yes, Priyank.
Yeah, perhaps you know, he may not have actually gone. Like if it was you know, because two people told him, so he may not have gone if both of those people didn't tell him. And it's like a kind of a message for us all in terms of reading signs, isn't it? But at the same time, we should be a bit cautious about that kind of, because you can really delve into that. You could go too deep into that, and it's sometimes a bit damaging, isn't it? Like I met someone that my friend was telling me that they'd met someone that was psychic, and they were really getting into it. And then my instant response was like, don't dabble too much, you know, she may be psychic, but you aren't. You know, there's higher powers and higher things that you can put your faith in rather than you know, self-claimed psychic person. And similar with other things. Like I remember another one of my friends, there was this person who claimed to be like really good at working with energies and in the spines and chakras and things like that. And my friend was he was a career practitioner, so she was like she was intrigued, and then she let him like do various things to her forehead and things like that. And afterwards, I was like, "What are you doing? You got the teachings. You don't need to like dabble in these other things. Like, just don't go there." And she's like, "Yeah, you're right. I don't know why. I just wanted to see. You know, I was curious." And I was like, "You know, it can be a bit. You don't know if it can be damaging to you or not, right? You don't know what's happening, so it's better if you don't know to not go in that direction, especially if your gurus, you're not in a position, especially if you're not in a position where you're still searching. If you're searching, then that's a different topic." Chris?
I think that's spot on, actually, and that's what I take away to some extent, you know, from what Yogananda tells us in this chapter. Because he goes there, doesn't he? And you know, he talks about this Perfume Saint, and he, as we'll go into, I'll not go into too much detail now, but his takeaway is like, you know, why are you doing what you're doing? So he's then teaching us, like, hey, like life will take you on this journey, but stay fast to your purpose. You know, the Kriya Yoga, stay fast to these teachings, because they're far more powerful than any of the side shows that, you know, life will, you know, present to you to distract you. So yeah, I think you're spot on there, Priyanka.
And I think also because Mukunda's heard that he's going to have this unusual, interesting experience from the sadhu, who has come out with an abundance of truth, of knowledge, and instruction. It's a reliable source, perhaps. Whereas if his friend just said it, perhaps not so much. But you know, as the sadhu has said, perhaps it weighed a little. Well, it did weigh more strongly on his mind. So yes, he's gone in and he's beheld Ganda Baba on the leopard skin, and then we're given a bit of an insight into what this Perfume Saint, in quotations, does. And the student sort of relays that, you know, he can give scents to flowers that don't usually have odors, or make a person's skin be perfumed with, you know, fragrance, or revive flowers even. And so Mukunda then looks at the saint, and he quickly looks at him back, and his gaze rests on his, and I think we've discussed before the power of the gaze, which you can find on previous episodes. So yeah, they obviously have quite a strong, gaze at each other. And then we have the description of the saint, and what I love here is the description of that he has large gleaming eyes. And I love the word gleaming because it means reflecting light. So it's clear in this description that there's some reflection of the divine happening through these eyes. And the first thing that this perfume saint says is, "Son, I'm glad to see you." So it's quite nice. And then he asks him if he'd like some perfume. And Mukunda's very, very confused and sort of says, "Oh, what for?" And he thinks it's quite childish. And I love this question, what for? And I took a lesson from this one. And I feel like we should also be asking this question before we do anything, like, what for? What is the purpose? And to truly and clearly try to see the reason why we are doing such things or involving ourselves. Yeah, Mike.
Mukunda at this point is a very spiritually evolved person, and so he goes to see a saint, and so I think he's confused because seeing a saint, he probably wants to meditate with him, he wants to bond on a higher level, and then when he says, "I'll give you a perfume," that confuses him because that's not usually what saints do, right? That is a material gesture. He's basically, and then later when they talk, he says he's doing it to prove God to him. But then if there's any person in the world that doesn't need proof of God, then it would be Mukunda, right?
Can I throw out a curveball?
Yes.
I hate baseball, but that term seems to be a good one.
Yep, I'm ready. We're not bad.
All right, Mike, you're ready.
No,
no.
You're ready.
No.
You're
No.
ready. You said you're ready.
No.
You're self-fulfilling. Okay, so here you said, why would why would a saint ask you, do you want to perfume? Well, why would you satisfy your mundane physical desires of a nice fragrance? But we will fast forward a few chapters to the Christ-like life of Lahiri Mahashaya or something, one of those ones, and you will remember that Lahiri Mahashaya, or Shamcharan Lahiri as he was then, upon meeting Babaji in the cave in the Himalayas, Babaji fulfilled a wish that Lahiri Mahashaya had of not just a nice smelling perfume, but a whole colossal palace with jewels and gems and 10-course meal and all those kind of things. So why was it justified there and not justified here, Mike?
Oh, Lauren, did you want to?
Well,
No,
I
Lauren.
thought that for Lahiri Mahashaya, that was a deep inward wish, and it was actually karmically tying him to earth. So by relieving him and letting him live in that wish, his karma was then eradicated and meant he could go to the divine, which he was meant for. Whereas in this case, this person is offering something that we hadn't even thought about and trying to produce more attachment, more desire, more curiosity, which is on the material plane. So there feels a very big difference between those two for me. What about you, Mike?
Such a good answer, Lauren. Imagine you would have had Babaji offering the palace to Lahiri Mahashaya, and he would have said, "What for?" Like,
Yeah.
Very different story.
No, but he was actually fulfilling his last, or one of his last wishes, right? Whereas the perfume is just something seemed a bit random to Mukunda.
And he was, as Lauren said, helping him become, attain to his realization in that. But it's really his re-realization, if that's a word, because he was, he was an avatar, so he just came and then he had to live his 30 years or so in the darkness, but as soon as the touch of Mahavatar Baba, he remembered everything and he became realized. And so in this lifetime, I can't wait for this chapter actually. In this lifetime, perhaps he got this like strong desire for a palace, but now he has to finish that to have that realization. Good answers, Mike and Lauren. Smashing.
Smashing. That's a great word. Thank you. But yeah,
Out of
so
the
they
park,
have. You'll be a cricket champion soon enough, Mike. So yes, they have this sort of to and fro then from that point where Mukunda's sort of questioning, well, he's definitely questioning, like, why would you harness God's power to make perfumes, and why do we need such things, basically. And he actually asks him if he can materialize flowers, which is interesting, and he says yes, but then he produces perfumes. And like I said, there's this to and from, like, why would you do this, such and such, and then we get to the crux of why this perfume saint, in quotation marks, is doing this. And Mike, what does he say is his purpose?
So Chris and I are going to read a short dialogue now. I'm gonna read for the Perfume Saint. It says, "My own purpose is to demonstrate the power of God."
Sir, it is necessary to prove God. Is it necessary to prove God? Sorry. Isn't he performing miracles in everything, everywhere?
Yes, but we too should manifest some of his infinite creative variety.
Bravo.
Well done. Well done.
Come on.
Well done.
Like,
Need more practice, me. But yeah, you smashed it, like you smashed it.
He actually plays by baseball, Chris, whereas you just pretend.
He's a proper Yank guy, so he has to.
But yeah, I really enjoy and respectful for this part of the chapter, because if you think about it, Mukunda is very young, and you've got this so-called saint who is drawing in the masses with his astral powers, and here he's saying the truth. Is it necessary to prove him? And it's true. There he is. He's performing miracles all the time. Why do we need that? And yeah, they go on here. Yes, Mike. Yeah.
and I'm not sure if it's just me, but somehow this taints the whole experience. This kind of question, right? Because Mukunda goes seeking out saints, and he gets those. He's very reverential with them. He cares deeply about their stories and everything. But here he just can't figure out why he's doing that, and it makes no sense to him.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and then they also have like this little discussion, don't they? After that, and he asks him how long it took him to master this art, and he said 12 years. To then, which he replies, you have been wasting 12 years for fragrances which you could obtain in a florist shop, which is hilarious and so true and direct and straightforward, and I love it. And I wish I could, or one day I will be as straightforward as little Mukunda, but that is fantastic.
12 years is significant.
It is.
You won't. Why is it significant, Laura?
Well, it's a very long time.
Oh no. the number 12 is significant in Indian culture. It's called I think it's called a Samya Kala, which means Kala, is time. Samya is like significant. So whenever you go through a change or something, an experience of your life, 12, I'm describing this very poorly, but 12 years is the allocated time it takes to be established in something. So, and whether that's a guru-disciple relationship, whether it's learning how to manufacture scents, it's all part of this theory in Indian science of 12. Mike, sorry.
Yeah, there's also the 12,000 years cycle, right? I don't want to go back into the yugas, but just saying 12. And then there is also in astrology, right? There's like, your life is like happening in sets of 12, right?
Yeah,
and
that's right. Yeah.
you have 12 houses and you go through them and then you start over again.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing that he said here is for manufacturing sense by astral means. So he brought in the astral element, which kind of means that he's linking magic or miracle to something that requires an awareness of astral science. So he's kind of linking miracles to astral science, which is I think is the first time I've really absorbed that concept. Mike?
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of the amulet, right? Which is also like something that is astrally created, and we learned earlier that if it's created astrally, that it's not really permanent, right? It's like kind of a temporary nature.
Effervescent, yeah.
I wonder if any of those flowers that were given perfume still remain perfume now that he touched or not. But yes, and that kind of leads us on nicely. So this saint then responds, and I actually find this curious in how he responds, and he simply says perfumes fade with flowers. And I think that's very telling of this saint's nature. You know, he doesn't try and disprove him, he just says a statement of fact. Yeah, Priyank, did you have something to say? No, okay. Yeah, so he just sort of says it as a statement of fact, and then we have a wonderful response from Mukunda. But before we get there, Chris?
Sorry, yeah, just an afterthought on what you said. Maybe it does tell us a little bit of something about the saint's disposition, because he obviously didn't engage, so to speak, with Mukunda's challenge, because he's challenging him, like, just go and buy the flowers, like what's wrong? But whenever I read this, I almost got the impression of it's so almost like showing off or something. So like, hey, like, you know, perfumes fade with flowers, but look what I can do. You know, you're going to be really impressed with this. Like, wait till you see this. Like, this is much, and maybe reading into it a little bit much, but
yeah,
it almost seemed completely missing. He purposely missed the point of what Mukunda, young Mukunda, was trying to get at. Maybe it does tell us, you know, more about what maybe Mukunda, Yogananda wants us to learn.
And in answering your previous point, Lauren, about how long do you think the fragrance stayed, I think we can with some confidence say that it wouldn't have stayed that long, because we heard, like, even from the amulet, you know, it disappeared. It was effervescent. It would disappeared when it fulfilled its purpose. And similarly, the fragrance would, dare say, if a flower wilted and, you know, became dry, and that's, you know, it's gone, isn't it? It's dead, and it wouldn't serve that purpose of being as magical anymore. So perhaps then, but yeah, you're absolutely right. The next line, the saint's response is very telling. He says, "Perfumes fade with death. Why should I desire that which pleases the body only?" That's what Mukunda saying that. Perfumes fade with death. Why should I desire that which pleases the body only? Mike?
And there's a similar point that Guruji brings up later when he talks about Lahir Mahashaya, and maybe it's not about the perfume, it's about the spiritual change that he might create in some of the people, right? That have the perfume and suddenly they feel like, okay, there's maybe something more to life than just what I can see and feel.
Yeah, it's a lovely way of actually looking at it, Mike. And it's true, you know, he was saying that his purpose was to display the power of God. So, and we know even from the start of the autobiography, it says, let me get this correct. Let me just flick in my book. Except ye see signs and wonders, you will not believe. So there's something to it.
Yes, and I think this line floors the Perfume Saint, because from this point he stops trying to convince him about the importance of perfume. He doesn't. He's stopped his his zealous quest to try and impress Mukunda. He's now then just resigned to the fact that he's obviously got some serious knowledge.
Mm.
Yeah, I think he kind of figured out after that sentence who he's dealing with here. It's like a spiritual master, right?
Yeah, even as a young boy, imagine that, you know.
And he says the next line is, "Mr. Philosopher, you please my mind," and that's obviously funny in English. But I was thinking about it in Hindi, and it might just be gnani, or like gnan is knowledge. So it would be something that's probably not as funny, but it probably might be said in a slightly sarcastic tone.
But before we go on to that little bit, I'd like to just jump back and talk about this. Why should I desire that which pleases the body only? And that again is so instructive, and we should be asking that question to ourselves daily, moment in moment, and being quite firm about it. So just a little fun homework for you all. I love my homework here on this podcast. I thought it'd be interesting, whether you do so already or you don't. But we could delve more into this question in our daily lives and ask, does this please the body only? And see what we observe. We don't have to share it with each other, or listeners, if you want to share your findings with other listeners in the comments, feel free to do so, of course. But mainly for ourselves as a point of introspection. It will be quite revealing, I think.
Does that mean that I can't eat chocolate anymore?
Does it please your body only, or is it for health purposes?
I can't. I've got some very healthy chocolate, as Chris and Mike are aware. But I don't know. I'll think about it.
Yeah, introspect.
I will. Thank you, Lauren. I've many times.
Pages about chocolate now.
I've many times introspected about that with a bit of guilt. This on my way home from work today, I found a very fragrant tree, and I forgot we were doing perfume, not because we were doing Perfume Saint, but very rarely I plucked a small branch and took it home. It was very nice. But am I doing that because it smelled nice? Yes, but it's also going to make the house a bit nicer. I don't know. How you deal with this, because if you're going to do about everything, then what's life going to be?
Well, as intended, perhaps. We should be catering to our spiritual needs first and foremost, and we must joyously do our duty to the body, but not be too caught up in it, I think. As Guruji tells us. Anyway, that's a whole other podcast for another time. So yes, he says this rather flooring comment to the saint, and he's pleased, and he says he pleases his mind, which again is quite telling also. If he's pleasing his mind but not his soul or spirit, we can see what kind of level of consciousness perhaps he's on. And then he asks him to stretch out his hand, and he makes his blessing, and then he asks him what perfume he wants, and Mukunda said he'd like rose, and he says, "Be it so." Be it so, yes. And then the fragrance shoots and wafts strongly from the center of his palm. And I love this next line. He says, "I smilingly took," and I love that, "I smilingly took." He seems quite pleased, or at least maybe he's feeling a little bit mischievous and thinking, "Oh, how else can I test this saint?" And he smilingly takes this scentless, odorless flower and asks him to permeate it with jasmine. And again, he says, "Be it so." And lo and behold, it happens. And it's such a true testament to the power of the spoken word, isn't it? When one is attuned with the divine. So Guruji Mukunda takes it and sits back down next to his students. and he's told here that Ganda Baba is his proper name, and I'm going to try my best to pronounce it. But before I do, yes, Priyank?
No, finish it.
I will try. Give it a go. If I do not pronounce it correctly, someone can help me out. Vishuddhananda.
Very good.
Close.
Very good.
That is his proper name, as Guruji puts it, which again I feel is a slight sort of nudge at how he's really feeling. You know, he's putting Perfume Saint in quotations and then saying, well, his proper name is actually this, not Perfume Saint. So if I am reading it in truth, that's what it feels like.
Yes, Vishuddha is the name of which chakra, Chris? You got 1 in 7 chance. 1 in 8.
I want to say throat.
Yeah, good man. Good
Yes.
man. Throat chakra, or in SRF we call it the cervical. Sometimes we have Om meditations where you chant the Om at various points in your body, which we call chakras, starting from the base of the spine. And when you get to cervical, the throat chakra, you'll say Om cervical, Om cervical, Om cervical. But if you wanted to say it in the Sanskrit, you would say Om Vishuddhi, Om Vishuddhi, Om Vishuddhi. So the throat chakra is an important one, but it's not the highest chakra, is it? The highest chakra is the Sahasrara, or the 1,000-petaled lotus at the crown, and that, you know, his name is not Sahasrarananda. If it was, then you would say that he's a self-realized master because he's mastered his highest chakra, but he's Vishuddhananda, which means that he's almost at the highest chakras, because the next one up is obviously the medulla and the Agna chakra, which is the next one, and then the Sahasrara. So if he was in that awareness, then he would be much more in tune with Christ consciousness and cosmic consciousness. But we could infer that from his name, he's quite elevated, because from the God Talks with Arjuna, Yudhishthira is represented. The 5 brothers are all the lower chakras up to Yudhishthira, which is the head of the family of Pandavas, and he is the throat chakra. So he's quite elevated in Yudhishthira stage, but not the ultimate. But yeah, Mike?
Is that really true? Because I thought if you're a Swami, you just take on a name that is an aspect of the divine, right?
But I was just inferring from the name, the meaning.
Okay. See.
Yeah, but yeah, reference to God Talks with Arjuna. I found some cool text in chapter 3, verse 16. Mike, if you'd be so kind as to read that section about the Vishuddha.
Yeah, internal consciousness of ordinary people operates only from the lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal centers that direct all material sensory perceptions and enjoyments. The divine lovers and celestial poets work from the heart center. The calm, unshaken yogi operates from the cervical center. He who can feel his presence in the entire vibratory creation has awakened the medullary and Christ centers. The illumined yogi functions in the cerebral center of cosmic consciousness. He may be spoken of as an ascended yogi.
So therein lies all the different chakras and the different states of consciousness if you're associated with that chakra.
Goal for us all. Yeah, thank you for that, Priyank. So yes, we're in the room with the saint, and yes, perhaps the name does reveal something. Who knows? But we learn where he learnt these powers from, and the student says that he learnt this Perfume Saint learnt it from a master in Tibet, who apparently had attained over 1,000 years old in bodily age, I'm going to add, because I think that's what he meant by he had attained the age. That's my guess. Yeah.
Shout out to our episode on the one of the most famous Tibetan yogis, Milarepa, and we did almost did a special episode on him on the preface episode for this podcast series.
Mike?
I just forgot to take my hand down.
Oh, never mind. Okay, so yeah, and here we're told that, you know, this Perfume Saint doesn't usually actually perform these kind of miracles or feats in this verbal way in which has just happened, but you know, and he differs his approach according to who comes to see him, which feels natural anyway. I feel that we do this daily on our daily lives, perhaps. You know, when we're interacting with other people, we change our approach and how we interact with them. But I would like to say, you know, with all of this said, like Priyank, he is, this saint, however much we put it in quotation marks, is highly elevated. He has a very, very high level of consciousness and an ability to be in tune with the divine and actually be a channel of the divine's creative powers, you know. And as much as, you know, it may not be that he is dissolved and now one with the divine, really it's amazing still that this is occurred, and really I feel it's a slight point of inspiration for me, at least, not to get to that point but to go further, and not get stuck, but you know, at least be appreciative of what he was trying to do was probably pure of heart.
Yeah, that's a good point. He is quite elevated. So that's something we should remember in reading this chapter, because he doesn't, Yogananda dismisses the technique of drawing the followers, but not to the person himself, I don't think, which is important. And also I liked, Lauren, how you said like how we also change our methods, you know, of interactions with people based on who we're meeting and what they're like. I tend to also do this when discussing matters of spiritual health, mental health, physical health, especially when they're subtly, as we know, very subtly related. You don't go all in on, you know, talks about God and stuff at work, but you can talk about mental health and physical health. My someone in my office was mocking me for having my celery and things like that, and broccoli, raw broccoli. Oh, and then I was thinking, and I was like, one day you'll have to eat this too. So I could have said this, you know, this is the optimum diet for spiritual, but I didn't obviously go to that. I said one day you'll have to eat this too when the doctor advises you to eat this food. While you'll do it with resentment, whereas I'm doing it joyfully. Which one would you rather have?
Priyank, you've got such a pure heart. You're so sweet.
Oh, you don't think that was rude?
I thought that person thought that. Yeah.
You don't think that was? I thought it was a bit rude.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just seeing the good in everything, but
I think so.
I still think it's sweet. You know, you could have gone all in, but you chose a route which you thought may perhaps be more easily to be received. So good for you, Priyank.
I know I have. Don't get me wrong. I've many times gone all in my younger days and been burnt many times as well.
Now you operate from the higher chakras, Priyank.
So yeah, as we said before, you know, this saint is quite highly elevated in his abilities, and this is reflected in the students, because the student is speaking, as Guruji says, with obvious pride. So you know, he's revered, and apparently he says that this saint has lots and lots of followers, and Mukunda inwardly resolves not to become one of them. And I love this part because it feels quite reflective, perhaps, of our own experiences. I know certainly for me, I've been in situations where you could have chosen to go down that route, but you have this feeling that that's not for you, and that you won't be following that particular path. Yeah, Mike.
There's two things I loved here. One is that the student showed pride in his guru, and that's really what a lot of people feel, right? When you're on a spiritual path, you feel proud of your guru, and then when you talk about him to other people, you get gleaming eyes, and that's something I can very much relate to. And he said the guru, too literally marvelous, was not to my liking, and I don't know where that comes from, but I feel like in his mind, a guru has to be strict and act discipline, right? And that's what he will get, right? So he definitely has an idea of what kind of guru he's looking for.
The marvelous comment is pretty cool, because you could describe Sri Yukteswar as marvelous, couldn't you? But he's more marvelous in a very subtle way, isn't he? Because he's obviously more than capable of manifesting these qualities of perfume or whatever. But he does it, and when he does do it, he'll do it to a select group of disciples, not just anyone that walks into his parlor. So they do it he is marvelous, and all our gurus are marvelous, but they operate in a different way.
Well, Guruji here, he uses the famous quotes again when he puts marvelous. He's like, all too marvelous. And I feel like by that he means like someone without edges and corners, right? Someone who is liked by everyone. And I feel like Sri Yukteswar, he makes a point of being not that. So maybe he meant it in that sense.
And like you say, he gets what his heart is calling for, doesn't he? And he gets that stern discipline, which we'll find out in another chapter. So we are going to come to a very interesting point where Mukunda comes home in the next episode, and you'll find out what happens when he returns to his house with these flowers, and also what happens next, how this saint produced such flowers and all of the astral powers that came with it. So I'm really looking forward to it. Yes, Priya.
Yeah, and another shout out to the graceful way of the Mukunda, because he said, with polite thanks I departed.
Yes, and he saunters home and reflects on the varied encounters, doesn't he?
Yes, which is nice.
Polite thanks, and that's again very indicative, isn't it, of his nature. So yes, we have lots and lots to look forward to in the next episode, and I have to say I've had a really joyous, wonderful time on this episode today, not episode, as I'm always told. What
No,
is it called?
It is an episode, but we're doing part 2 of this chapter,
2.
So they're all episodes.
Yes, Chris.
I've just to mention it, Yogananda requested Rose, didn't he?
Oh, Chris, you can't.
No, I'm not. I'm not
Okay,
going to mention
fine,
anything about
major spoiler. Yeah.
But it's got a real significance, doesn't it? And he loves Rose, but there is, for anybody who doesn't know, apparently an age that is assigned to certain smells, and apparently Rose is indeed part of this age that we're in. So there's something more to that. Maybe the listeners, we can challenge the listeners to dig in. If anybody knows, feel free to share for the community, for us all to learn about. But
which age are we in, Chris?
We've just passed the Kali Yuga. We're in the part of that Yuga.
Nice. Is it ascending or descending?
Thankfully, I said again.
Ah, nice, very nice.
But
But yeah, we also use roses for commemoration services, and then we lay them at the picture and offer our devotions in that way before or halfway through the meditations.
Lovely. And on that note, I hope you all and our lovely listeners offer your rose petals of devotion at our Guru's feet in your own meditations. I hope you've enjoyed your time with us today. I've really enjoyed it. It's been lots and lots of fun. So thank you all for your wonderful contributions and all of your joy and knowledge and sharing. So thank you. We will meet again next time for some exciting knowledge and stories, and we'll see you very, very soon.
Jai Guru. Thank you.
Jai
Nami.
Guru.
Jai Guru.